I used to think trust was simple. You love someone, you trust them. You grow up in a family, you trust that family. You don't double-check every word, every gesture. You just believe because not believing would make life unbearable. That's what I used to think. Until the moment my husband grabbed my arm and shouted, "Get out, now." We were still moving, still on the road. And just like that, trust became something else entirely. My name's Lena. I'm 41. I work as a dental assistant 3 days a week, coach volleyball on weekends, and spend most nights reminding my daughter to brush her hair and my husband to stop leaving his socks on the stairs. We live in a modest town in Texas, the kind of place where people know each other's dogs but not each other's marriages. I've been the responsible one in my family for as long as I can remember. My mom used to joke that I came out of the womb holding a clipboard. I never drank in high school. I filed my taxes the day I turned 18. I paid my brother's court fees twice, once for a DUI, once for something worse. So when my mom asked if we could help her deliver supplies to a rural food bank she was volunteering at, I didn't think twice. It was a Saturday. Chris, my husband, took the wheel. Our daughter Mia was half asleep in the back seat, earbuds in, forehead against the window. I was sipping lukewarm coffee, feeling good for once. Like we were doing something that mattered. My mom had organized this whole drive: clothes, canned goods, hygiene kits for folks out in the sticks. She called it her purpose project, said it gave her meaning in retirement. I believed her, because she's my mother, because I wanted to. The day before, she dropped off 3 boxes. "Just bring them with you," she said. "We're low on space in Dan's truck." Dan was her neighbor/handyman/who knows what. I didn't ask questions. The boxes were taped shut. One was labeled blankets, another snacks. The third was unlabeled. I didn't open them. Should I have? Probably, but you don't open your mom's donation boxes unless you're looking for trouble. And I wasn't. The road to Teshville was narrow and sun-bleached, the kind of place where radio cuts out and billboards advertise cattle feed. We were maybe 10 minutes from the drop-off when Chris suddenly straightened up in his seat. His hand tightened on the wheel. I was mid-sentence, rambling about volunteer sign-ups for Mia's school, when he snapped, "Lena, get out. Right now." I thought I misheard him. "What?" He slammed the brakes. I said, "Get out." The car jerked to the gravel shoulder. Mia screamed. I dropped my coffee. My heart was pounding so hard I couldn't hear myself think. Chris threw open his door, ran around to mine, opened it, and pulled me out. I thought he was having some kind of breakdown. His hands were shaking. His eyes were locked on the back seat. I followed his gaze. The boxes. That's when I saw it. Just for a second. The corner of the unlabeled box had come unsealed, probably from the stop. Tucked between packs of granola bars was a plastic-wrapped brick, off-white, compressed, and taped tight. It didn't look like food. It looked like something I'd seen in a news report. Something you don't deliver to food banks. Something that puts people in prison. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Chris stepped between me and the car. "Lena," he said, "I need you to listen to me. I don't think your mom is who you think she is." My knees buckled. I dropped onto the dirt, dust sticking to my palms. I looked at Mia, frozen in the back seat, eyes wide, earbuds dangling. Chris didn't say another word. He walked to the back, popped the trunk, and pulled out the box. He set it down, grabbed a pocket knife from the glove compartment, and cut it open. The inside wasn't just 1 brick. It was 3. 3 identical packages wrapped like something out of a documentary. I knew exactly what I was looking at, even if I didn't want to. We stood there in silence, the sound of cicadas buzzing through the heat. And then I said it. Not even thinking, just blurting it out. "My mother put that in our car." Chris nodded, jaw clenched, with our daughter in the back seat. That's when something inside me cracked. Not loud, just a hairline fracture that ran straight through everything I'd built with her. Every ride I gave, every bill I paid, every lie I told myself to keep believing she meant well. And then my phone buzzed. It was her. My mom. Text message. "Did you make it okay? Let me know when you drop everything off." I stared at the screen, then at the box, then at my daughter. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I said to myself, I think I'm done protecting her. But what we did next, that's the part I never thought I'd be capable of. The first thing I felt wasn't rage. It should have been. I was standing on the side of a hot Texas road, staring at 3 bricks of what looked like cocaine that my own mother had hidden in a box marked blankets. My daughter was in the back seat. My husband had just saved us from what could have been a felony charge and a lifetime of explaining. And all I could feel in that moment was shame. Not for what she did, but for what I hadn't seen. Chris didn't speak much on the drive home. Mia had fallen asleep from the panic of it all, clutching her stuffed animal like it was some kind of shield. I just stared out the window, watching telephone poles slide past like silent accusations. I kept replaying every single moment with my mom in the last few months. The sudden money, the slick little projects she wanted help with, the way she'd started using words like grind and opportunity like she was selling a startup and not whatever the hell this was. Back at the house, Chris placed the box in the garage, wrapped it in garbage bags, and locked the side door. Then he turned to me and asked, "You okay?" I nodded. But I wasn't. I wasn't okay the next day either, when I called my mom and she answered like nothing had happened. "Oh, good morning, sweetie. How'd it go? Did you drop everything off?" I stood there in the kitchen, holding the phone to my ear like it was burning my skin. She was so casual, not even nervous, not even trying to fake concern. I told her we didn't make it, that something came up, that we had to turn around. She paused for less than a second, then said, "Well, no big deal. I'll have Dan swing by and pick up the boxes." Dan. The man I barely knew. The man who suddenly had a new truck and 3 small businesses in his name. The man who once tried to sell CBD oil to my daughter at Thanksgiving. That Dan. And still I said, "Sure. Let me know when." Like a coward. Like a trained dog who still brings back the stick no matter how many times it gets thrown into traffic. But something broke that day. Not in a dramatic way. Just a quiet fracture in my spine that kept widening with every text, every lie, every time she called me sweetie like it could erase what she'd done. A week later, I found myself in the pantry, sitting on the floor with a bottle of wine at 3 p.m., while Mia did homework in the living room. I wasn't drinking. I just needed to hold something that felt heavier than me. I hadn't told anyone. Not my friends, not my brother, who probably knew more than I wanted to admit. Not even Chris, beyond the basics, because saying it out loud would mean I had to decide what kind of daughter I wanted to be now. And then came Sunday. We were getting ready for dinner when there was a knock at the door. I didn't check the peephole. I didn't need to. There's a certain kind of rhythm to a mother's knock, impatient but entitled. I opened the door. There she was, Ellen Pierce. 61, short red hair dyed just enough to convince herself it wasn't fading. Oversized sunglasses like she was shielding her soul. She was holding a casserole dish. Spinach artichoke, probably. Her apology food. "Thought I'd stop by," she said, like she hadn't just used her daughter and granddaughter as drug mules. "We missed you last week." Chris stood behind me, arms crossed. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His silence made the air feel heavy. "I'm not letting you in," I said. She blinked. The fake kind of surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You put something in my car that could have gotten us arrested." "Oh, honey," she said, waving her free hand. "You're being dramatic." There it was. The script. She wasn't even trying to write a new one. "It wasn't even real," she added. "It was for show. You know, decoys. Dan's idea." Chris stepped forward. "You're telling me you planted fake drugs in your daughter's car without telling her?" She shrugged. "It wasn't a big deal. Nobody got hurt." I laughed. Not the funny kind. The kind that comes when your body doesn't know whether to scream or collapse. My daughter was in the back seat. Well, maybe if you helped out more, she snapped. And there it was. The real voice, the one she used when the mask cracked. I wouldn't have had to get creative. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I just reached forward and shut the door. It was 2 days later when I got the call. Not from her. From my brother. He sounded off. Quiet. Like someone had just yanked the rug out from under him, but he was still trying to act like he was standing. "You might want to sit down," he said. I already was. "Mom's house got raided this morning," he said. "They found stuff. Real stuff. Not decoys, not fake. She and Dan, they're being charged." I didn't speak. My chest felt hollow. Not relieved. Not vindicated. Just empty. He cleared his throat. "She told them it was yours. That you knew. That you helped." And just like that, the person who gave me life tried to take mine away. I didn't cry when my brother told me she blamed me. I didn't yell. I didn't collapse on the kitchen floor like they do in the movies. I just stood there, one hand on the countertop, staring at the fridge like it owed me an answer. My daughter's school photo was pinned next to a grocery list. My husband's work schedule was stuck under a takeout magnet. Everything looked normal. Nothing was. "She told the police it was yours," he said again, as if repeating it might soften the blow. I whispered, "Of course she did." There was a long pause, then he said, "I don't know what's going to happen. They took her in. Dan, too. But if she's saying it was you, I don't know, Lena." That was the moment I realized something no one had ever said out loud. It wasn't just that she didn't love me. It was that she never thought I was real. Not really. I was a tool, a shield, a cleanup crew, a daughter when it made her look good, a scapegoat when it didn't. Chris came home 10 minutes later. He took one look at my face and didn't ask. Just walked over, wrapped his arms around me, and waited until I could breathe again. We got a lawyer the next day, just in case. She was calm, focused, the kind of woman who wore black suits like armor and didn't blink much. She looked at the photos Chris had taken of the box, the contents, the time-stamped GPS records showing where we'd been and when. She nodded. "This helps. A lot. But you still need to be careful." The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I kept checking the windows like she might be standing outside, casserole dish in hand, smiling like we were just one heart-to-heart away from healing. But she never showed. No calls, no texts, just silence. And somehow that made it worse. Mia kept asking why Grandma wasn't calling, why we weren't going to her house anymore. I didn't know how to answer. I didn't want to turn my mother into a villain, but I also couldn't let my daughter grow up thinking love looked like manipulation. So I told her the truth, or a version of it. "Sometimes," I said, "people we love make choices that hurt others. And when that happens, it's okay to walk away." She looked at me with those big brown eyes, her dad's eyes, and nodded like she understood. But I don't think she really did. Not yet. The investigation moved fast. Turns out this wasn't their first rodeo. There were surveillance videos, texts, bank transfers. I saw a snippet of a police report that listed my mom and Dan as co-conspirators. That word stuck in my throat like glass. Then came the subpoena. They wanted me to testify. I almost said no. I wanted to slam the door on the whole thing, disappear, move to a cabin in Montana, and never say the word mother again. But Chris said something that changed everything. If you don't speak, she wins. So I testified. I told them everything. The boxes, the phone calls, the knock on the door. I showed them the photos, the messages, the receipts. I watched the lawyer for the state nod and scribble and thank me for my bravery, like I'd volunteered for this instead of being dragged into it. And then, one night, After the court hearing was over and the house was finally quiet, I opened the box again. The one I'd stashed in the garage. The one with the fake blankets. I wanted to see it one more time. Maybe to make it real. Maybe to make sure I hadn't imagined it all. But when I peeled back the tape, what I found wasn't 3 bricks of drugs. It was 6. 6. 2 more than before. Which meant someone had been in our garage. Chris and I looked at each other like we were standing on a frozen lake, waiting for the crack. He whispered. The bags were double wrapped when I sealed them. Did you open them before now? I shook my head, numb. Number never. And that's when I realized the real betrayal hadn't stopped with her arrest. It was still happening, right under our roof. And the worst part? It might not have been her, because someone else still had access, and someone else wanted me to burn. The second I saw 6 bricks instead of 3, something inside me just stopped. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was calculation. Cold, precise, like my brain stepped out of grief and into gear. Because if someone had been inside our garage, it wasn't random. We'd changed the locks. We had cameras. We'd shut every door, except one. The side window. The one my brother helped install last year. Chris must have seen the look on my face change because he said my name the way you do when you're trying not to scare someone already standing at the edge. Lena, what are you thinking? I told him. Every single thought. That the tape didn't match the ones we'd used. That the folding was too neat. That someone didn't just tamper with it. They repacked it better. Like they were trying to make it look untouched. But they weren't careful enough. They added 2. He nodded slowly, then said the thing I hadn't let myself say yet. Your brother? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Growing up, my brother Nate was the charming one. Quick with a joke, never stayed grounded for long. Always a new idea, a new hustle, a new almost business. I was the one who stayed behind, who made sure the lights stayed on when he couldn't hold down a job, who signed on as a co-signer when he wrecked his credit, who let him crash on our couch 2 separate times after divorce number 1, then again after number 2, who told my daughter to call him Uncle Nate even though he hadn't remembered her birthday in years. But there were moments, quiet ones, where he said thank you without words, a tired smile, a random burger left on our porch with a note, a time he fixed the garbage disposal without me asking. So I kept letting him in, even after he said I was overreacting when Mom got arrested, even after he hinted I was being dramatic for testifying, even after he said, and I quote, "She's still our mother." But now I was looking at 2 new bricks that could have ruined our lives if we hadn't checked. And I couldn't ignore that he was the only other person who knew exactly where that box was. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting every time the house creaked. My heartbeat was a metronome, steady and cruel. Around 3 a.m., I got up and went to the kitchen, sat in the dark and scrolled through old messages. Nate had texted me a week before. You doing okay? Let me know if you need anything. Now it read different, like a fisherman checking if the hook had set. I didn't respond. I didn't plan to. Until the next morning when I opened the front door to take out the trash and saw a manila envelope tucked under the welcome mat. No postage, no return address. Just our last name printed in capital letters. Inside were photos. Me, Chris, and Mia at the grocery store. At the park. Coming out of her school. All taken from a distance. All grainy, all time-stamped. There was a note. You sure you want to make this worse? That's when the fear hit. Not a sharp jolt, but something deeper. Something that slid under your skin and stayed there. I sat on the kitchen floor and felt the breath go out of me like a balloon letting itself down slow. Chris took one look at the envelope and went pale. We call the police, he said. But I shook my head. Not yet. Because this wasn't just fear. This was control. This was about power. About who owned the story. And after a lifetime of being the one who cleaned up the mess, I was done reacting. I needed to respond. I dug through a drawer and found my old phone, the one I hadn't used since we moved. I plugged it in, waited for it to boot, and opened my cloud account. Everything was still there. Photos, texts, voice notes. One in particular I remembered, from last Thanksgiving, a drunken voicemail from Nate. He was ranting, angry about Mom, angry at me for not having her back. But in the middle of it, he slipped. He mentioned something about moving product, about helping Dan with drops, about me owing the family. I hadn't listened twice back then. I'd written it off as rambling. But now it was evidence. I emailed it to myself, then to our lawyer. Then I sat down, picked up my phone, and texted Nate one line. "You left fingerprints. Hope you cleaned up." No response. For hours. Then finally, "You don't know what you're doing." But I did. For the first time in my life, I really did. I didn't want to ruin him. That was the difference. I just wasn't going to be the one bleeding anymore. Chris changed the locks again. We installed security cams inside and out. I told Mia we were playing detective. She liked that. She made up code names for us. Agent Mom, Agent Dad, Agent Cat. That night, I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and stepped outside to take a call from the lawyer. She sounded calm, focused. "I sent the voicemail to the investigator," she said. "You'll want to sit down for this." I didn't. She said, "There's a warrant out for Nate." Then she paused. "And Lena, we found something else. He made a deal 6 weeks ago with your mother to shift the charges." My blood ran cold. Shift them to who? There was silence. Then, "To you." I stood in the hallway, phone still pressed to my ear, staring at the living room like it had just turned into a crime scene. The TV was on low, Mia watching some cartoon, her head resting against Chris's shoulder. I could hear her giggling, completely unaware of the world her uncle had just tried to drop on our doorstep. Shift the charges. That was the phrase the lawyer used. Nate had made a deal, a real, legally binding, ink-on-paper deal, with our mother and her attorney weeks before the arrest. If anything went sideways, if the cops found the stash, if there was a case, they'd push it toward me. They'd built a narrative that placed me at the center. The one who transported the product, who packed the box, who turned on them after things went wrong. And it might have worked too. If Chris hadn't stopped the car that day, if we hadn't kept the photos, if I hadn't testified. I walked into the kitchen, sat down, and stared at my hands like they were foreign. I used these same hands to hold Nate when he was 6 and sobbing over a scraped knee. I signed the loan that got him out of debt. I paid for his phone plan until 2 years ago. These were the same hands that poured him coffee and defended him and made excuses for him for over half my life. And now, they were the ones holding the wreckage. Chris followed me in, gently closed the door behind him, and said nothing. I think he knew I needed the silence more than comfort. We met with our lawyer in person the next morning. She laid everything out. Timelines, messages between Nate and our mother, even a bank transfer that linked him to a second stash they hadn't recovered yet. It was airtight. But she warned me. They're still trying to spin it. He's saying you orchestrated it, that he was just doing what you asked. I laughed when I heard that, not because it was funny, because it was exactly what I'd feared most of my life. That if I stopped playing the role they wrote for me, they'd rewrite me as the villain. But this time, I had the pen. We submitted every shred of evidence. The voicemail from Thanksgiving, the security footage of Nate lurking near our house the night the new bricks appeared, even screenshots of a shared Google Doc where he'd listed contingency plans in case Elle ever flipped. And yes, Elle was me. In court, I sat across from him. His face was unreadable. My mother wouldn't look at me. Not once. They tried to poke holes, of course. His lawyer said I was emotionally unstable, that I'd turned on my family out of resentment. He even pulled up texts from 4 years ago where I called my mom exhausting and said Nate was one bad choice away from jail. I didn't deny it. I looked the judge in the eye and said, I stand by all of that. And I wish I'd said it louder. The turning point came when the judge asked why, if I was the mastermind, I'd brought my daughter along on the trip. I didn't even have to answer. The silence said enough. Nate was sentenced to 5 years, no parole for at least 3. My mom got a lighter sentence. Plea deal, first offense, age considered. 18 months, but not at home, not with an ankle monitor. Real time, real walls, real consequences. I didn't go to sentencing. I didn't need to. I just sat on the back porch with Chris and watched Mia draw chalk stars on the patio stones. There's this moment I keep replaying in my head. Something so small it shouldn't matter, but it does. The last time Nate left my house before everything went to hell, he patted my shoulder and said, You're the glue, sis. You keep us all together. And I remember thinking, God, that's the problem. I wasn't born to hold people together. I wasn't born to be someone else's backup plan. I spent decades translating guilt into obligation, into silence, into yes. But this time, I chose myself. I chose my daughter. I chose peace. And no, it didn't feel triumphant. It didn't feel cinematic. It felt quiet, clean, like something poisonous had been pulled out of me slowly. And now I could finally breathe. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that loyalty without boundaries is just self-destruction with better PR. Anyway, that's the story. Not the one I ever thought I'd tell, and definitely not the one I wanted. But maybe it's the one I needed. If you've been through something like this, if your definition of family has been cracked open and rewritten, I hope you'll share it in the comments. I think stories like these help more than we admit. And if you want to stick around, you know what to do. But no pressure. This space isn't about numbers. It's about people. The ones who stayed, the ones who chose peace, the ones who finally chose themselves. Thanks for being here.